How many metal rinds do you think there are? Like, how many layers of metal? Just one, or?
Well, yeah, you probably seen my seismic wave video where I talk about my speculation that there are metal rinds based on what the MOHO layer was all about, basically. And that was when they were detecting seismic waves and they were hitting this barrier, and the refraction of the waves was accelerating to a very significant amount, which implied that it was going through a much denser medium under the ground. And so if you understand that sound is going to actually accelerate through a denser medium like metal, that to me that makes it's obvious.
I think the metal rinds are playing a role with the celestial sphere, how it operates as well, because when I worked at GE, I worked in the detector engineering department, and I helped engineers. I basically ran tests for them and stuff on CT machines, and they have this giant Faraday cage. It's like 30 feet high, a football field wide. So they were testing the X-ray machine, and they couldn't figure out why it was making RF noise in a certain spectrum. I forget what frequency it was, but it turned out CT machines are balanced by weights. You have to balance, each machine is slightly different, so you have to balance each side of it with weights. It turned out metal plates with oil in between them.
Wow, are you kidding me?
No, it was generating RF noise.
That's exactly what I was saying. I was saying there's a lubricant between these metal rinds. It's either metal or it's either oil or water, but yeah, there's some kind of lubricant.
Yep.
And that's what I was saying. That's why I believe that these rinds actually press us over a long period of time. That actually causes the north magnetic pole to move, because I believe there's these openings in the north and the south. That actually is indicative by when you see the auroral zone. So that obviously that's shifted over like 10 degrees, and so wow, that's confirming right there. Amazing.
Alright guys, I'm going to try to explain the auroras, how they work, how they really work, because obviously the Earth is concave and there's glass in the sky, and the glass acts like a vacuum tube, like a vacuum chamber, like a plasma ball that contains plasma, in which solar radiation is hitting the geomagnetic radiation of the Earth. I think the Earth has a metal rind to it. I think that this metal rind is slightly tilted. I believe, let's put my lightweight program, the cutaway of it I believe that the continental and the oceanic plates were formed over the metal rind, over the water. I believe there's a layer of water that's sandwiched in here. And Scripture says in Job 26 that I stretched the north over the empty place. I also believe that it was stretched over the south as well, where this area is just plate. There's no metal there. So the continental plates, the sedimentary rock was created by the water. And so it's stretched over. I don't believe there's really any, I mean, there might be some little pinholes here and there in the north and the south, but I believe it's been covered over like that with water. Now if you, if I grab the little lip here, the metal lip, you can see the auroral zone. Okay. It's also tilted, right? The magnetic north pole, magnetic south pole, or the geomagnetic north pole and south pole, they're tilted. So they're not going to be exactly in line with the true north, the true geographic north, or the geographic south. It's going to be slightly, it's about 10 to 11 degrees. So let's just tilt it a little like that. So now you can understand why there's a difference, why the auroral zone, it doesn't line up perfectly with the geographic north and south. And so this auroral zone, actually I tilted it the other way, it's like over Canada. Let me quickly tilt that the other way. There we go. There we go. So it's tilted like that. It's also interesting that the poles are flat, right? Well, that would make sense. If it was stretched over with sedimentary rock that created the plates, there's no metal there, so, I mean, the poles of the Earth are flat, right? So this auroral zone, okay, it's just mimicking the opening of the metal rind. This is my theory. And this magnetism of the metal Earth, the metal rind of the Earth, it's coming out from the north, it's going around the outside of the Earth, and it's coming right back up, shooting back up north like that. There's declination within the Earth, magnetic declination. That's like these vertical, semi-vertical lines going throughout the Earth that are caused by a deviation of the vertical magnetic flux. So the continents, you know, there's stuff in the continents, whether it's metal or whether it's changing the direction slightly of the magnetic deviation, which wants to go perfectly vertical. So the sunlight within the Earth, here's the sun's rays. During the auroras, the end of the sun's rays, the auroras happen like in the cold, in the wintertime, or getting close to the wintertime. So let me just tilt that sun a little bit down. Like that. Just bear with me. Bear with me. Tilt it down a little bit. Okay. Now, the end of the rays are going to interfere with the auroral zone, the magnetic activity coming up from the lips, from the metal lips of the rind of the Earth. Okay, it's not the magnetosphere, the glass sky. It's causing the vacuum, creating the plasma, creating the nitrogen and the oxygen. And there's still a little bit, and it's not a complete vacuum, so there's still some nitrogen and oxygen above the glass, which is creating the striations, this interference, the solar wind, the end of the curved rays of the sun interacting with the magnetic flux of the lips of the metallic rind of the Earth. That's how I believe. So this metal, it's shifting, it's moving, it's the water that's sandwiched between, or the oil that's sandwiched between, is shifting. So you have the inside of the Earth, heaven, it's staying perfectly vertical. Okay, it's not shifting whatsoever. But this outer metal rind is over the years. Okay, the magnetic North Pole is moving every once in a while. So that's what I believe is happening. That's how I believe the auroras are happening. Auroras happen in this state, within a vacuum, with glass. Glass acts as the insulation, the insulator. So it blocks all this, all these rays, the solar radiation, and it creates the striations like that. Don't let them tell you differently.
Okay, seismic waves within the inverted hollow Earth. Now there's a version by a man named Jan, whatever his name is, I'm correct, where he gives his own version of the hollow Earth, how the seismic waves move. Actually, initially they proposed this model. Okay, you're looking at the Earth, you're standing on the Earth, which is convex, which they have it. It's not really convex. But anyway, there's a shadow zone at 105 degrees and 140 degrees that virtually no seismic activity occurs there. However, there is still a little bit of activity that occurs there. Like if you look in this diagram of the solid convex Earth. They have 105 to 140 degrees where there's no seismic activity. You got the black lines and the red lines. The black lines are the P waves. The red lines are the S waves. The S waves are secondary. Black lines are primary. Secondary waves don't travel through liquids or gases. They only travel through solids. There's a version of, okay, you got the P waves and the S waves. Problem is, okay, basically going back a little bit, there's a man named Moho Reupload, seismic discontinuity. Basically, in Croatia, early 1900s, he talked about 35 kilometers below, there was a rapid acceleration in velocity at that level when there was an earthquake here in Croatia, basically. So he concluded that the material has to be denser. It has to be denser than basalt rock, basically, because basalt rock, granite rock, has densities of 2.6 to 3.0. Okay, so metals have a higher density. So basically, seismic activity, seismic waves can travel faster through metals, especially obviously fastest through platinum or gold. So going back here, I wanted to talk about a little bit about this discontinuity. They call it the moho, or the mantle. Now he's saying there's actually a line that separates the crust from the mantle, but I'm saying the moho, if you want to call it that, is the actual mantle. Okay, this is my version. The inverted hollow Earth. Okay, right here. I'm going to zoom in over there. Right there is the epicenter. Let's say the epicenter of an earthquake happens right there. Okay, this is the continental, the granite plate. This is the basalt, the oceanic plate. I'm saying beneath that is the moho, the mantle. That's made out of metal. And then there's another layer of water. This is just speculation, but I believe that this is kind of what I've concluded, basically. And then there's also a metal rind. And there's possibly even more layers of metal beneath that. This is the outside of the Earth, okay? You're thinking we are living in the inside of the Earth. Okay, up in the middle is heaven. There's an octahedral core, and then you have inner space. You have the planets. You have the sun, the moon. Okay, so basically here, let me zoom out a little bit here. Okay, you have the epicenter of the earthquake, and the red line would be the secondary wave. The yellow line would be the primary wave. I'm saying that if there's an occurrence here, it's going to generate in both directions, actually. I just have it going in one direction, but it's going to generate this seismic wave. The S waves and the P waves are going to be going through this solid metal very fast, very quickly. Okay, this is at the 105 degree shadow zone cutoff. So the red line abruptly stops because it's entering the liquid. Okay, there's a liquid here. This is what I'm saying. I'm not sure, I'm just speculating. And the P wave continues on into the liquid, but it's too weak to reach the surface. So you still get some seismic data within this shadow zone, but you don't get that much, basically. That's what I interpret. That's what they tell me, basically. So anyway, what's going on here, I believe, is that the P wave is continuing on into this liquid, and then it's beginning to reflect back and curve around back. So basically, at the surface here, okay, here's the ocean, here's the land. When you're detecting seismic activity below, obviously the signal is getting weaker because it's getting further down, but you're still detecting it. Okay, once it enters, once it exits the mantle, the moho, and enters the liquid state, you can barely hear any seismic activity whatsoever in this shadow zone. Especially, you cannot hear any S waves. But the P waves continue on, and the P waves reverse back, and then they hit the other side of the Earth. So that is actually a biblical model too, as well, because if you look at Psalm 12, the words of the Lord are pure words, as silver tried in a furnace of earth, purified 7 times. Silver and earth and 7 times. It's very interesting because Cyrus Teed, now a lot of people think he's a whack job, but actually he was a very intelligent man. And looking back in retrospect, I think he was a little bit too, I don't know, he was just a little bit too static, too rigid in some of his terminology, but he had it right. He said, okay, the universe is an agar shell obtaining as a structure perpetually recreative and existent. It is limited by the environment of its shell, circumferentially and by the astral nucleus centrally. Now, number 3, its circumference has 7 metallic layers of superimposed strata. Okay, so it's 5 mineral strata. Okay, so he's basing this, I'm not sure if he's having divine revelation. He said he did actually, but I tend to believe, yeah, the Earth has a metal rind to it. Earth also rings like a bell. Okay, so basically, you have this metal rind. If I can even add the other layers too. If it does have these other layers here, basically you have these layers, and they're sandwiched between. I think Cyrus T actually said there was like a mercurial solution in between them, but this is speculation. But this works. This works much better than the solid Earth hypothesis, as well as the convex hollow Earth hypothesis. Jan Lamprecht basically saying that initially, okay, this is your initial version of the seismic activity on a convex planet that happens to be hollow in theory, basically. But they only have the S&P waves going to about 80 degrees, and so this is where they would need to go. And so they have to revise their model to create this much smaller interior, this much smaller hollow interior. And they have to say, well, okay, then the S waves are gradually speeding up as you get deeper and deeper, as the material becomes more denser, and then it transitions, and then it starts to shift and become less dense, so it slows down. Now, this is all conjecture and theory, and it's just a ridiculous model, because if you understand anything about information being suppressed and true nature, watch my other videos. This is the true nature. We are living inside the concave edge of the Earth, which is stationary. Cyrus T performed a rectilinear experiment in 1897, and there's also the Tamarack plumbob mineshaft experiments, which showed that the plumbobs actually diverged at the bottom of the mineshaft. So basically, one thing that Lampert does right is that he does attest that the shadow zone is not completely void of seismic activity, as a solid Earth would lead you to believe. And another thing about the solid Earth is they have to figure out why the P waves are reaching the other side of the Earth a lot later than they should. And so basically they're saying that that's why they create this, I guess you would call that the outer core. But they're saying that there's higher elasticity there. It's not necessarily lower density. It's just all theory and conjecture and bullshit. Okay? Just understand that there is a metal outer edge to the Earth. There's at least one metal outer edge to the Earth. The Bible confirms that, Cyrus T confirms that, and seismic activity confirms it. Okay, these seismic waves are moving very fast through this medium, especially when it hits the so-called MOHO layer, the mantle, 35 to 50 kilometers. So that's the true nature of the universe. We're living inside it. So
I don't think I've ever explained volcanoes and the concave Earth in a video. I've done it in text, but I just want to do it really quickly. If you watch a previous video of mine, I uploaded a couple years ago, April 21st of 2013. I talked about seismic waves, actually confirming a highly dense metal encased hollow rind to the concave Earth, and possibly concentric layers as well, with water or oil sandwiched in between. And so this whole thing is pressurized. It's one big pressurized container. That's what Earth is. And so this is what would be happening. You would be getting higher pressure and higher temperature the further down you went. And so there's a cutaway of the concave Earth. And as you can see here, the bottom of the oceanic or the continental plates is going to get extremely hot. And then there's this MOHO, they call it the Mohorovičić, whatever his name is, layer. It's 35 kilometers down. And so what they found out is that there's this highly dense layer at about 35 kilometers that actually causes the seismic waves to reflect back at a higher velocity. And so that's why they concluded that. And within the concave Earth, that is my speculation, is that there is a metal layer that's housing the continental and the oceanic plates, and because of the high pressure, because of the high temperature, that magma is melting and it's butting up against the highly dense layer, and it has nowhere else to go, so it creates these fissures in the actual plates, and it seeks less pressure. And since less pressure is only found in higher elevations, it finds the highest elevation possible, which would be the top of mountains. And eventually it builds up to a point where it cannot contain it anymore and it explodes, and that's how we get the volcano. Also to do with pressure, heat, and the metal rind of the earth blocking the molten magma from actually going any further. So there you go. Hi guys, this is my version of the Earth's magnetic field lines within the concave Earth. As opposed to a convex Earth where they have a barb magnet in the middle, I believe that the magnetic current or field lines are wrapping around the outer edge, going in and out from the north and south. I believe there's actually openings in the north and south of the rind. Okay, I believe those openings are covered over with continental plates. I believe that's also why the poles of the Earth are flattened, because they don't have that outer metal covering. So you have these openings. This is a cutaway, obviously, but at the north and south we have these openings, and the magnetic flux is exiting out the north, going around the outside and coming back in from the south. And these openings are offset. The rind is offset slightly. If you'll notice the auroral zone, it's like 10 degrees offset. It's not perfectly aligned with the geographic north and south poles. And I believe that this rind is precessing, slowly shifting, because I believe that there's like layers within the Earth, whether they be water or oil, that's actually lubricating the outer rind to press us back and forth. I believe that's also why the magnetic north and south poles shift, because of this precessing effect. The magnetic north poles are not precisely in unison with the shift. I believe that's because of the different perturbations that are happening within the Earth, but for the most part, I believe that this is like a rocking back and forth mechanism. We're never going to have like a magnetic reversal, I don't believe, especially because the time is short, but this is how I believe it's operating. I believe the auroras are happening because of the Earth's magnetic field is interfering with the sun's magnetic field at the glass sky level at 100 kilometers, and that's what's causing the auroras to happen. And yeah, so this is my theory about the Earth's magnetic field. It has an outer metal rind to it, and they have openings in the north and south that are covered over with continental plate, which flattens out the poles. Thanks for watching.